deficiency. And the reason we're thinking taurine, again, is going back to the cats that had dilated cardiomyopathy. That was a taurine issue. So it makes sense that if dogs are getting a similar heart disease in breeds that are not known to get it, that it should be a taurine issue. But then we go back to these grain-free diets have high protein concentrations. A lot of them have high organ meat concentrations. There should not be a lack of taurine. And the kind of common thread right now among veterinary cardiologists is that it may be that they actually on paper have enough taurine, but the legumes or potato in some cases is preventing absorption of the taurine or preventing incorporation of the taurine effectively. And we don't know why and we don't know how. So there's a lot of questions, and it could honestly end up being that it's not the diet. So the University of California, UC Davis, is currently doing research into the potential problem, but it's going to take years to figure it out. And there have been a few diets that have been kind of singled out as far as ones that they really do think are causing this effect. So Acana pork and squash, Nutrisource grain-free, kangaroo and red lentil is another possibility. And the problem is that because we know there's an issue, we don't know why and we don't know how, we have to kind of make this blanket statement. And so many veterinary cardiologists are saying, do not feed any grain-free foods, which, like your big four, Eukanuba, I'm Science Diet, Nutro, they're like, yeah, we knew it. We hadn't been doing grain-free. We only started because it was such a fad. But realistically, there's a lot of really good grain-free diets on the market, and dogs don't need high concentrations of corn, which is a grain, which is very commonly found in a lot of lesser quality dog foods. It's just cheap. That's why we started using it. So I don't think that this means that all grain-free diets are bad and grain-free diets should not be fed in any dog. My own dog eats a grain-free diet, but I think we need to be careful about what ingredients are in there and the order of the ingredients. So we definitely want to make sure at least the first ingredient is meat. And if there are legumes in there, we want them lower on the list. Like we don't want, beef and then chickpeas, because knowing what we know now, that just potentially increases the risk until we really understand the reasoning. So if you have questions about your dog's food, whether it's appropriate to feed to your dog, whether it could cause issues, just talk to your veterinarian. Keep in mind, rice is a grain and it is not a legume, and there's been no association in rice-based diets and dilated cardiomyopathy at this time. And there's a lot of reasons to recommend a grain-free diet. Not every dog needs a grain-free diet. But in my personal opinion, dogs are scavenging carnivores. So they are meant to eat higher concentrations of protein. So they really don't need a food where the first ingredient is corn or potato or rice. They need a food where the first ingredient is meat. And we'll likely do an entire podcast about canine and feline diet, as well as, like the difference between dry, canned, semi-moist, dehydrated, freeze-dried, and raw. But if you think about dry food, okay, so they take all these ingredients, and depending on where they get the source of the meat, because you're allowed to use what's called rendered protein in canine foods. It's protein not considered fit for human consumption, but still has a high nitrogen source. So that's things like feathers, beaks, protein that would not be considered like muscle meat that's potentially bruised that we wouldn't sell to people. So you take these proteins that may or may not be high quality proteins, you mix them with a bunch of grain, or in the case of some grain-free diets, not every grain-free diet is good, because a lot of times like chickpeas or lentils may be the first ingredient. And again, that goes back to why are you feeding them a diet where a non-protein source is the primary ingredient? That's not going to be super healthy for your pet either. So they take protein, regardless of the quality, they combine it with some sort of starch, okay, whether that's a grain or a non-grain, and they add in some vitamins, some minerals, fish oil sometimes, probiotics sometimes, joint supplements sometimes some vegetables, some fruits, and then they mix it all up and they really dry it out and they desiccate it, right? Because if you think of a kibble, a kibble's not soft, it's this hard, crunchy, round ball. And a lot of heat and a lot of energy is put into that diet to dry it out. So the concern becomes, how much nutrient can they actually extract from that diet? And is there an option that is better for them aside from the dry food? And again, that's kind of like a whole other soapbox/topic that I started getting on. But not every dog needs to worry about their diet if they're on a grain-free diet right now. But I would suggest that you look at the back of the bag, look at the ingredients. And if a legume or potatoes is the second or third ingredient, talk to your veterinarian. They may recommend switching foods. You can do taurine levels. It's a blood test. And that'll tell you if the animal is actually deficient in taurine. Any animal that is on a grain-free diet that all of a sudden has a heart murmur, you should consider seeing a veterinary cardiologist. The problem with taurine testing is it's really expensive and it takes a while. And so if you want to do it, do it. It's just a lot of times people don't necessarily want to spend the money on a test they may not need. But if your pet does have a heart murmur and is on a grain-free diet, you may want to consider seeing a veterinary cardiologist. There's also a blood test you can do that tells you if there's stress on certain heart enzymes called a proBNP. And you may want to consider changing your food or adding in taurine supplementation. The problem with taurine supplementation is nobody really knows a prophylactic dose. And so the other thing to consider is if it's something in the food that's preventing you from absorbing taurine well, will supplementation actually help? Will you just kind of be fooling yourself? And long-term overdosing of taurine can actually cause issues, so there is a safety issue on the flip side. So I think that the easiest thing to do is talk to your veterinarian, have them look at the food that you're feeding, make sure that it's safe, make sure that it's a good fit for your pet, and make sure you know why you're feeding that food. You know, do they like it? Are their poops normal? Does their coat look good? Do they have more energy? So there's a lot of things that need to go into the selection of food, and it can be extremely overwhelming because there's 1,000,001 types of foods on the market. I mean, as a veterinarian, I walk into a pet store or I look at chewy and it's just, there's 1,000 choices, so it's very hard. So I hope that kind of helps clear some of it up. Unfortunately, the grain-free heart connection is still kind of nebulous, and we don't know exactly what it is, and I still don't know if it is actually the grain-free diet. And unfortunately, because there's a lot of questions and because the FDA and veterinary cardiologists have gotten involved together, it's not a great idea for veterinarians to say feed a legume-based diet with protein to your pet, because we could be causing more harm than good without even knowing it. I hope this answers some of the questions about those two FDA issues. And realistically, the summary is the FDA is trying to help alert clients. Unfortunately, a lot of times it just freaks everybody out, and then these alerts come out, the News at 5 covers it, and then we get 1,000,000 phone calls that evening. And you can actually sign up, I just saw on the FDA website, to get these alerts, which after I finish this, I will do that, because then I will get them before they go on the news. Because unfortunately, what has happened, at least to me, is that I don't know these alerts have been issued until 5 clients call and they're concerned. So we have to say, we'll get back to you. We go read the alert, do a little research, come back to them. So I think this, if nothing else, has allowed me to be better prepared to answer your questions in the future. And if you have any further questions about either of these issues, the oral flea and tick or the grain-free diet, feel free to email us, info@independenthillvet.com. You can give us a call. And don't forget to listen to our podcast going forward. And the next podcast will be about a day in the life of practice managers. Have a great day. I think that about wraps it up. As always, thank you for listening to this installment of Vetsplaining. I hope you enjoyed your time with me and ideally learned at least one new thing for the day. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, feel free to leave a comment below or email info@independenthillvet.com and put podcast topic or podcast comment in the subject line. Until next time.